Hey, poets and poetry fans, this is James P. Wagner at Local Gems Press, and today we're going to be doing a little video on understanding poetic meter. If you've ever taken a poetry class or been part of a workshop, you probably know most of this. Doesn't hurt to freshen up on the facts, though, and some people actually have no idea about how poetic meter actually works. This is actually a topic we get requested to talk about a lot, so here we are. The makeup of poetic meter. Basically, poetic meter is the rhythmic structure of a poem. Many poetic forms, at least in the Western world, define themselves by what their poetic meter and structure is. Not so much in Eastern culture, where it's more the content that determines what the poem is, but in Western culture, a lot of the forms, specifically their rhyme and meter structure, determines what type of poem it actually is. So it's kind of important. If you've ever attended any kind of literature class whatsoever or heard of Shakespeare, you probably know what iambic pentameter is. It's the most well-known type of poetic meter in the English language, used frequently in Shakespeare's sonnets and in his plays. An iamb is an unstressed syllable and a stressed syllable, or two syllables following each other, and it's consisting of 5 lines. We'll get into that a little bit, but one example here you probably recognize. But soft, what light through yonder window breaks, from Romeo and Juliet, whether that's your favorite or not. Everybody knows of that play. And iambic pentameter can be seen throughout that play and many of Shakespeare's other plays. Oftentimes, if you're in a poetry writing class and they want you to write a Shakespearean sonnet, they'll tell you that they want it to be an iambic pentameter. So you may have a rough idea of what that is from that. But let's examine the makeup of iambic pentameter just a little bit more. You can see that when it comes to iambic pentameter, there's 2 main elements. The iambic part, or the iamb, the foot, and the pentameter, the meter. An iamb is the type of foot which consists of the 2 syllables, like we just said, and that's an unstressed syllable followed by a stressed syllable. And pentameter is just the type of meter which signifies the number of poetic feet in the line. Pentameter specifically means 5 feet. So iambic pentameter is basically 5 feet of iambs, and since the iambs are 2 syllables each, it's 10 syllables total. So once you can kind of see that there's only 2 main parts of what makes up the poetic meter, it's pretty easy to kind of figure out what's what. These are the main type of poetic feet that exist in the Western world. There's iambic, which is, like we talked about, unstressed and stressed. There's trochaic, which is exactly the opposite, stressed and then unstressed. There's spondaic, which is stressed, stressed. Anapestic, which is 3 syllables, which is unstressed, unstressed, and stressed. The reverse, dactylic, which is stressed, unstressed, unstressed. And then there's pheric, which is unstressed, unstressed. Although pheric doesn't actually exist by itself in terms of a single word. I don't know of a single word in the English language that actually is pheric. If you know of one, then feel free to reach out and let us know. But typically that's a combination of 2 words together. In fact, there's some scholarly debate about whether a pheric actually exists or not. The jury's kind of still out on that, and most modern scholars don't really recognize the pheric, so you don't see it very often, but wanted to include it because it is one of the main poetic feet. So again, we got iambic, trochaic, spondaic, anapestic, dactylic, and pheric. So those are the poetic feet. That's half the equation. And then the length of the poetic meter. So you'll see here 1 poetic foot would be monometer, 2 dimeter, 3 trimeter, 4 feet tetrameter, 5 feet pentameter, like iambic pentameter, 6 feet hexameter, 7 feet heptameter, 8 feet octameter, 9 feet nonameter, and 10 feet decameter. So basically, when you take the type of poetic foot with the number of feet in it, you get what it is. For example, if you had iambic syllable structure, but you had 8 feet, it would be iambic octameter. If you had an anapestic and that was 3 feet, it'd be anapestic trimeter, so on and so forth. As we'll see in this next example, you may be familiar with Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven, and that's a pretty long poem. It's 18 stanzas of 6 lines each, and most of the poem is written in trochaic octameter, as you can see here below by the examples. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered, weak and weary. You can see the syllable makeup there is a lot of trochees. You've got the stressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed throughout the entire line. And, as you can see, it's 8 trochees, so trochaic octameter. And that's pretty much the makeup of that poem. So again, when it comes to poetic feet and understanding that, as long as you know the type of foot that it is, and then the number of feet that is in the line, that's how you combine the two and you get to know what the poetic feet is. Ionic pentameter, trochaic octameter, so on and so forth. So that's pretty much all we have for today. Hopefully this made the concept of poetic feet and a meter in a poem a little bit simpler, or just help brush up on that. We see certain feet more often than others, but if you go back and through the very long history of poetry, the wealth of literature that we have, you'll see good examples of all of them. So hopefully look out for a few of those, take a look at what they're like, do a little exploring, maybe try to write some poems with a little bit more rhyme and meter. We live in a world right now where there's a whole lot of free verse poems, even though free verse is itself a form, but getting a little bit back to the root and the core of the rhyme and meter certainly couldn't hurt. In fact, it can make the free verse a whole lot better. So that's all we have for you today. Hope you enjoyed. We'll probably have some more information in the future about poetic rhyme and meter, but for now, take care and keep on writing.